I recently saw a video from America's Test Kitchen where Dan Souza made Peruvian roast chicken on the grill using a beer can. Have you tried the beer can chicken? Am I the only one who hasn't? I've heard about it, but cooking a beer can always made me uneasy. What about the ink on the outside? What about the BPA lining inside? Is that safe? Well, ATK said they looked into all those issues and came to the conclusion that it was safe. So I finally did it. I shoved the beer can up the ass of my chicken and put it on the grill. In spite of a few mishaps, I can see the appeal of this method. The chicken it produces is phenomenally tender and juicy. Unlike my regular videos, this is not a tutorial. This is a recipe review. You'll get to see me learning, not teaching. And I'm sure I'll get tips from my wonderful viewers on what I can improve. Before we get started with the chicken, a quick reminder: if you want to know when I post new videos, join my Patreon community for free. No donation required. It's just a way to deal with the fact that YouTube notifications suck. The night before grilling, I put together a marinade. It included beer, I used Allagash White, garlic grated on a microplane zester, lime juice, soy sauce, salt. I used 4 teaspoons of Diamond Crystal Kosher instead of 2 teaspoons of table salt called for by the recipe. Cumin. I didn't have dry thyme, so I used dry oregano, black pepper, and yellow mustard. The idea here is to get the marinade under the chicken's skin. The recipe asks to separate the skin of the breast and even to get under the skin of the legs. It's really not as hard as it looks. Once you make an opening, you can easily wiggle your fingers in there. I also had to poke the skin around the spine with the tip of a knife to help the fat render. And tuck in the wingtips. I poured about half of the marinade under the skin and pushed it into all the crevices. Then I poured the rest of the marinade on top of the chicken. I set it into a bowl breast side down overnight and put in the fridge, then flipped it over in the morning to allow the legs to soak. Since a charcoal grill was the first choice given by the recipe, that's the one I used. I figured it's a good opportunity to practice playing with fire. It took my briquettes about 20 minutes to turn partially white on top as the recipe instructed. When they were ready, I set a disposable pan in the middle of the grill and poured the briquettes on both sides of the pan. It took a little rearranging to get my piles to be even. Then I set a foil packet with wood chips on top of one of the piles and set a rack on top to preheat. I covered the grill and opened the vent, placing it opposite of the wood chip packet. 5 minutes later, I put the chicken onto the beer can with the remaining beer and set it on a rack. I stuck a Typhor probe into it to monitor the temperature, but guess what happened when I put on the lid? This! I didn't know what to fix first, the injured chicken or the flaming wood chips. I figured there was no hope for the wood chips, so I focused on the chicken. I had to give up on Typhor. There wasn't enough clearance on top and not enough depth on the side, since Typhor needs to be embedded all the way to the black line. But that's okay, I have my trusty thermopan. Once the chicken was up and the fire was down, it was smooth sailing from there on. Every 15 minutes, I rotated the chicken 90 degrees. I was a little worried about my briquettes cooling off, but they held up until the chicken was done. When it came around full circle, I checked the temperature of the legs. In just over an hour, I reached 175 in the legs and took the chicken off the heat. The recipe didn't say to check the breasts, but I did and got 135. Then I rested the chicken for 15 minutes. During this time, the breasts got plenty hot to be safe. The final temperature was around 153 and it spent more than 3 minutes above 150, so there were no safety concerns. I've discussed the chicken safety so many times on this channel that I don't want to sound like a broken record. I'll give you a link in the description below to the video with a thorough explanation of this. Getting the beer can out of the chicken was harder than I expected. The problem here was that everything was hot, and I couldn't exactly lay the chicken on its back because the beer would spill all over. But if there is a will, there is a way. It just took a lot of paper towels. Okay, the moment of truth. The texture and juiciness of the meat were fantastic. The flavor was smoky, which I liked, with a hint of beer, which I didn't. It's possible that was my fault. Maybe when the chicken fell over, some of the beer spilled. If you like beer, this could be a feature and not a bug. The skin was very well rendered, but very soft, not even a hint of crispness. That's understandable. Given how juicy this chicken was, it would be unrealistic to expect a crispy skin. You really can't have your cake and eat it too. What would I do differently next time? I would increase the salt in the marinade at least by 50%. The salt level was a bit low to my liking. I realized that the recipe used a good bit of salt, but most of it got trashed with the leftover marinade. For a wet brine, this one wasn't all that salty. I would also try drying the chicken before putting it on the grill. The recipe didn't mention drying, so I didn't. Since this is ATK we're talking about, I assumed this was intentional. But I think I might get more browning and slightly firmer skin if I dried the chicken. Now, wood chips. Dan explicitly said in the video that the wood chips should be dry. My intuition tells me to soak them next time, but if all your grilling gurus could chime in, that would be great. Some viewers asked how my charcoal grilling adventures were going, so I'll give you an update. I still don't like it. Every time I use it, I feel like I need a shower right away. Everything, my hair and my clothes smell smoky. I also have to shut all the windows to keep the smoke out of the house, which is a bummer when the weather is nice. So next time I make this chicken, I will use my gas grill. How does this chicken compare to the one I made last week? Beer can chicken has a few more ingredients, takes more time to cook, and has a softer skin. But it is slightly more tender and juicy. The moral of the story is that there is no such thing as a perfect roast chicken. A world in which a perfect roast chicken would exist would be a boring world. The joy is in tweaking all these parameters ever so slightly to get just a little closer to perfection. Thanks to David Pazminio and Dan Souza from ATK for their fabulous videos and recipes. Here are more thought-provoking culinary videos for you to check out, and if you are ever in the Boston area, maybe I'll see you in one of my classes.